On this episode of Locals Only, we're going to talk about the top 5 most abandoned and illegal places to visit in Virginia. Now, it's no secret that not every place is free or even open to the public. This list contains locations that are illegal for curious people to travel to. I'm not going to get into all the legalese, but basically, if you're trying to go visit these places, you could be arrested or fined. Keep that in mind. This is more of a guide for those who are interested, but maybe they don't want to break the law. So number 5 on our list is the abandoned Virginia Renaissance Fair in Fredericksburg. In the late 1990s, a Virginia Renaissance Fair popped up to offer visitors a view into medieval history, with properly modeled castles, houses, costumes, and even a ship docked in a small pond on the property. Performers strolled the grounds, providing shows and other entertainment, and a modest cohort of regional Renaissance Fair enthusiasts would frequent the park. Staff stomped all along the watchtowers and gave song and dance and made the Renaissance Fair a fun time for all, at least until the swamp swelled up and swarms of mosquitoes and other creepy crawlies choked the operation daily, and it shut down this sprawling medieval land after only 2 years. Some of the property's items were sent to a business in Wisconsin and saved, but strangely, none of the buildings were demolished or torn down. They were simply left behind and left alone. Anyone thinking of checking it out should keep in mind that the site is private property and it's patrolled by the Stafford County Sheriff's Department. Not only that, but it's also used by the local sports club for hunting, target practice, and other potentially hazardous activities. It's actually the most dangerous place to visit on this list. That's all assuming that the swamp doesn't get you first. Now, number 4 on our list is the Hidden Hills Lane Mansion in Leesburg. This is a striking contemporary mansion in the Beacon Hill community, and it was built in 1986 for a Saudi prince who already owned 2,000 of the surrounding acres that once belonged to media legend Arthur Godfrey. Now, the Saudi prince decided to build a modern mansion atop this wonderful scenery, and it was designed after geometric shapes were bent from glass and dark wood into this 3-story villa. And it contains some of the most beautiful views of the Blue Ridge Mountains to date due to its wall-to-wall glass on each side. This glorious home contained a pool, jacuzzi, squash court, a butterfly staircase that stretched in the main hall. It was much like a hobbit house in The Lord of the Rings, the way it was built into the hills. Sadly, though, the prince spent very little time here. He sold the house in 1996. The mansion is still a beautiful sight to see. And you know what they say about Virginia? It's a commonwealth, where the wealth ain't common. This might be one of the easier places to visit, but that doesn't make it any more safe. So if you do want to check this out, again, it's not maintained. So next on our list is Virginia Beach's DLH Sports Complex, which was an investment project from the former NFL player Dre Bly, who's from Chesapeake. It was designed to be a training base for pro sports teams. It's supposed to be like a community magnet for youths in the area. But unfortunately, it failed to get off the ground because of the 2008 Great Recession. Essentially, it's a 15-acre site located near Northampton Boulevard. It has an outdoor football field. It had a pool, although it's best known for the giant abandoned hangar on site. But so far, the only thing that's in use is that football field. Ironically, the thing they kind of didn't build is the thing that's being used the most. Things that they did actually spend time building, the parking structures, lighting, that airplane hangar you see so prominently, that stuff's just completely disregarded and crumbling now. So unfortunately, the millions and millions of dollars that basically sank into the ground are still there, they're just not being used. But if you want to check it out, it doesn't look like it's too hard to get to. You can actually just walk along the road. You can see it. I'm not sure about fencing or patrols of security. Again, trespassing, don't do it. But if you want to check it out, it doesn't look like it's too bad. It doesn't look like there's a lot of video. I would love to go to this place and check it out myself. So subscribe if you want to see a future video on this place. I would love to check it out myself personally. Be the only person on YouTube that actually has video of it. So please like and subscribe, comment below if you want me to check this place out. Never hurts to give support. The number 2 location is the abandoned St. Francis de Sales Catholic School in Powhatan, Virginia. It was established in 1899 by former Pennsylvania heiress and socialite Catherine Drexel. And this is interesting. Catherine is actually one of the first, if not the first, American saint recognized by the Vatican. So that's really wild. I didn't realize that they were granting sainthood to people in the last couple hundred years, especially Americans. And since she was the first American-born saint, I find it kind of hard to believe that her building was so abandoned. Especially since it was providing education for young African-American women and Native American women too. It was a large, stately brick building that was serving the community near the St. James River. It housed 20,000 students over the 7 decades it was open. After renouncing the Philadelphia social scene and joining the Catholic Church in the late 19th century, Drexel decided to give back to the communities that surrounded her, especially to those who probably needed it the most. Named for her father, St. Francis de Sales, and you heard that right, another saint. Apparently her father was ordained a saint. After Mother Catherine died in 1955 at the age of 96, the order she founded, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, unfortunately couldn't operate without her and struggled to maintain funding, and St. Francis de Sales closed its doors in 1970. In the 40 years since, the campus has steadily deteriorated. Amazingly, this is the only location that hasn't been vandalized by people just visiting. All the stained glass, as far as I know, is still intact. For an old building, it's holding up well, but that being said, it doesn't mean it's perfect. Portions of the ceiling and interior walls have begun to crumble, and its floors are faded and scarred. In 2019, the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament sold the 2,200-acre property housing both St. Francis de Sales and its sister school, St. Emma, to a private developer, leaving this pair of scholastic castles to an unknown fate. And that leaves us with the number 1 spot, the moment you've all been waiting for. This one's a little bit difficult to talk about because the name of the location is a little difficult to even say. So some call it the DeJarnette Sanitarium or the DeJarnette Lunatic Asylum. And this is in Stanton, Virginia. Not Staunton. Ignore that you. People made a point that out to me last video. Sorry about that. I am from Virginia. I am a local. I'm just not from all of Virginia. Sorry. So, anyways, back to the video. There's a couple different names for it, so don't be fooled if you see one and then the other and think they're 2 different locations. The other location it gets confused for is the Western State Hospital, which is also in Stanton. And you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities between them, the buildings, the construction. You'll also notice that Dr. Joseph DeJarnette, who I'll talk about in a second, worked at both locations, so it's really easy to confuse these places. But that being said, the DeJarnette Sanitarium is a wild story. It is a very large building, lots of rooms, lots of stuff to get into. So before I get into the history of the location, I just wanted to show off a couple pictures and get you involved in what I'm actually going to be talking about. This place is enormous, several rooms, several different buildings too. I mean, it used to be a hospital, and people really did live and die there. People had lots of history there, and I'd love to talk to those folks. I'd love to do my own episode on this, but seeing as it's abandoned, 1, and 2, illegal to actually enter it, I like to go to the locations I visit, so maybe if enough folks join my Patreon, I'll be able to do things like this. You know, maybe be a little riskier. The DeJarnette Sanitarium was established in 1932 as a private mental health facility for patients that were well off enough to fund their own medical treatments. Dr. Joseph DeJarnette was one of the most well-respected and elite members of the medical community in Virginia. But unfortunately, he would later be ruined by the ugliness of his ethically disgusting preference for eugenics and sterilization, which he pushed as the final solution for treatment. Essentially, over the several decades-long career, his enthusiastic endorsement of the practice changed the course of history forever with Virginia's legislation. So basically, they passed a ton of laws that forced sterilization to people they deemed as undesirable. So essentially, if they decided, hey, we don't like the fact you're left-handed, or you get headaches a lot, whatever they want it to be, you could just be completely removed from the gene pool. But thankfully, after a little bit of time, people started to see how horrible that was in the 1940s, thanks to the association with a certain, what do they call it? The Nazi Party in Germany, because they were doing it too with the Holocaust. So when people started to see how unethical that was, they decided to get rid of it. But it did linger until the 1970s. So for decades, he cast a long shadow over the medical community. The man was so in love with eugenics, he actually wrote poetry about it, which you should be able to read right on the screen. But the state took over the DeJarnette Sanitarium, thank God, in 1975, and they decided to repurpose it as a pediatric hospital. Now, they did name it after him still, as the DeJarnette Center for Human Development, but they kind of figured out that's probably not a good idea either. So in 2001, they renamed it to the Commonwealth Center for Children and Adolescents. The original DeJarnette Sanitarium still stands to this day, but it is abandoned, it's decaying, and unlike the last entry on our list, this place is trashed. You'll see tons of graffiti, you'll see tons of doors being broken down, you'll see the walls are falling apart. Even though there are some really interesting sights inside of it, there's a boiler room, apparently there's a morgue in the basement, supposedly. I don't know how true that is, but the place is a giant building. It's enormous. But on the inside, it kind of reflects that ugliness associated with it. So if you ever go there, be prepared to see a lot of stuff. Now, I'm conflicted with this one because it looks pretty easy to get to. There's a couple different videos online of really easy. People literally just walk across. There's a Lowe's across the street right in front of this place. You can literally walk from the parking lot of the Lowe's into the building because there's a giant hole in the wall. But the other thing is that I've heard other people say there are people that patrol. There are obviously people don't want you going in there. It is falling apart, and they don't want you trashing it any more than it already is. Even though, I mean, all the damage is already done, but still. So I've heard conflicting reports of either it's really, really easy to get in there and just walk around and check things out. And I've also heard try not to get caught because you can get caught pretty easily. So a little bit indifferent on this one. But again, I've never been there. I'm also trying not to break the law. But if you've made it this far, I appreciate it. I thank you so much. Bleep bloop some comments, like, subscribe. That all of it helps me. YouTube doesn't know how to measure this stuff. They don't know if you like it unless you like it. Once again, this is Patrick from Locals Only saying, thanks for watching.